Hi, welcome to my video on the basic rules of factoring binomials and trinomials. Notice I said the basic rules. There are certain rules that I follow in teaching the topic of factoring. And if you follow these rules, then most of the factoring will go great for you. Let's assume the polynomial is factorable. Let's assume the polynomial is factorable. If the polynomial is factorable, then I always follow these basic rules, and let me outline them and go through them. Basic rules. Number one, write the polynomial in descending order if a single variable. I only write them if there's a single variable, because if there's a double variable x and y or a and b, then you can do it, but not too often until you get up into high calculus and higher grades. Arrange in descending order is number one rule. Arrange the polynomial in descending order. Let's do some examples. I already showed you this, but the descending order is 2x plus 6, because that's a 1 and that's a 0. Constant is always on the right. Now the constant of 6 is understood to be 6 times x to the 0. Remember, x to the 0, the 0 is with the x, so that's a 1. So that's why the constant is on the end all the time. B, the descending order is a 2, which is an x squared, then a 1, which is a negative 3x, and a minus 11. Notice as I switch them around, I do not change the signs. It's only when we're solving equations, when I move transpose across the equal sign, do I change that. But there's no equal sign there. There's no equation, so I just shift them around, keeping the same sign. X squared, x, and a constant. So it's a negative x squared minus 7x plus 8. Descending order. 2, a 1, and the constant has an x to the 0. Understood. D, I have an x cubed, is the highest. I have an x squared, which is next. I have a x, which is next, and the constant is always on the right in descending order. Practice with the 4 of these, and that means you pause your video, work the 4 of these out, press play when you get them done to see if you're right. Here we go. Descending order. The square goes first, and the x goes next. 2 and 1. The square goes first, the x goes next. Oops, 20x. 20x. I'll get it right now in a minute. So I have negative as a positive. I didn't change the signs. 2, 1, 0. And we have a lot here, so let's pick the highest power first. Is x to the 5. Then that's done. Then we have a 3, so x cubed. Done. Then we have x squared, so it's a negative x squared. Done. Then we have a 4x. Done. Then we have a 3. So 5, 3, 2, 1, constant. Notice the x to the 4 is missing. So the x to the 4 is missing because this is 0x to the 4. And 0 times x to the 4 is just 0, so that's missing. Don't have to put it in. Number 4, we have a 4x and a minus 9, descending order. So number 1 rule is that I follow. I always write it in descending order, because if I don't, the polynomial is going to be hard to factor. The second rule is what we call the greatest common factor, GCF. The first rule in factoring when in descending order. So after you put it in descending order, then you always look for the GCF. First rule in factoring, always look for the GCF first when factoring. If you take the GCF out, you might factor further. So, descending order, yes, 2 is common to both of these numbers, so is 2 outside, so 2x divided by 2 is x, 6 divided by 2 is 3. Done. X is the GCF. Notice x is in each term. That's a 1. So the smallest exponent is 1. X squared divided by x is x. Negative 9x divided by x is negative 9. Multiply back. X times x squared. Perfect. X times negative 9. Perfect. Notice that's a 2 and a 1. So that's going down. So when you divide, the inside is going down, so that's a 1 and a 0. Perfect. C, I have a 3 and a 6. Look, 3 is the smallest number, so 3 is a factor of 6. So 3 is the numerical GCF. I have an x in each term, so I write it down, and the smallest exponent is a 1. So 6x squared divided by 3x is 2x. And 3x divided by 3x is just 1. Notice that's a 2 and a 1 going down. So when I factor, I should have a 1 and a 0, right? Because that's a 1 and that's a constant. D, descending order, perfect. And I take out the negative. 7 is a factor of 14, so 7 is a GCF numerical. And I have an x in each, and I take out the 2. 2 is the smallest exponent. Remember, the smallest exponent is in the larger one. So negative 7x divided by negative 7x cubed divided by negative 7x squared is just x, positive. Positive divided by negative is a negative. 14 divided by 7 is 2. X squared divided by x squared cancels out. So notice I have an x and a constant. Perfect. GCF, I see an A, an A, and an A. There's no numbers, only a 1. We take A out because it's common. So AY divided by A is a Y. Negative A divided by A is negative 1. And 8A divided by A is plus 8. Oh, and notice these two terms could have been added at the beginning. So that's a Y plus a 7. Negative 1 and 8 is a 7 because I didn't notice that I could add these. So if you did add those at the beginning, like this, negative 1 plus 8 is a plus 7a. Because these are like terms, if you added them at the beginning, and then you said, well, A is my GCF, and took the A out, you get a Y plus 7. So if you added these two and got 7a and then factored, you get A times Y plus 7. If you took the A out of all these terms and notice when you're finished that you got a 1, negative 1 and 8 and you add them, that's okay too. Because you don't have to do, sometimes the order can be different. And F, I see a 10 and a 15, so I see a factor of 10, which is a factor of 5. Factor 15, 5 is a GCF numerical. I see an x in each term, so I take an x out, and that's a 1. And I see a y in every term, so I take a y out, and that's a 1. Smallest exponent for x and y is 1. So now we divide. 10 divided by 5 is 2. X squared divided by x is x. And the y's cancel. I do not need any more y's there because I already have the y that will give me this when I multiply. 15 divided by 5 is 3. X divided by x cancels out. I don't need any more x's. And 3 subtract 1 is a 2. So that's a 1. And 2, when you multiply, you add to get a 3. So notice, there's the GCF, but this time is a double, xy. And we have a fraction. So let's take the fraction out. Fraction is a half. So a half x divided by a half is x. And 3 divided by a half is 3 times 2 over 1, or 2. So that gives me a plus 6. Removing the fraction. So, second rule is the GCF. Always take the GCF out. And you might be able to factor further. You got to be careful on that. None of these went any further. You know, this can't factor further, this can't, and this one, they can't factor any further. But be careful. Practice means pause the video and work the 6 of these out to see how you're going to do. Here we go. 7 is the GCF. 7x divided by 7 is x. 14 divided by 7 is 2. That's a negative. 14 divided by 7, negative 2. X is the GCF, but the smallest exponent is 2. So x squared is the GCF. X cubed divided by x squared is just an x. 6x squared divided by x squared is 6. Check. Multiply back. X squared times x is x cubed. X squared times 6x is perfect. In number 3, we have a 5 as a numerical GCF. 5 is the smallest number, so 5 is a factor of 20, so take a 5 out. We have an x in each term, So the smallest exponent is a 1. And we divide. 5x squared divided by 5x is an x. Negative 20 divided by 5 is negative 4. And x divided by x is 1. I do not need any more x's. Perfect. 5x times x, 5x squared. 5x times negative 4, negative 20. If you put an x here, right here, you already have an x here, so this is going down descending order. So you don't need any here. If you put an x here and multiply, you'll get an x squared there. So there's no x's go here because you already have the 1 right there. Number 4, we have no numbers common, and we have a y and a y and a y in each term. So I'll take a y out. That's GCF. by divided by y, you get a b. ay divided by y, you get a negative a. And a negative y squared divided by y is negative y. Multiply back. Y times b, perfect. Y times negative a, perfect. Y times negative y, perfect. Number 5, I have a negative leading coefficient, so take the negative out. 2 is a factor of 12, yes, 2 is the GCF, because I always look at the smallest number. Because the factors of the smallest number have to be in the larger ones. And I have an x common, but the smallest exponent is 3. Here we go. Divide, I get an x. Divide, I get a negative 6. 4 and 3 is going down, so that's a 1 and a constant, perfect. And check, multiply back. Negative 2x to the 4. Positive 12x cubed. Remember, I have an x here. I don't need any x's here. That's a cube. To get a cube, I have the x's already. And a 1/5, take the 1/5 out, because the leading coefficient should be a 1. 1/5 divided by 1/5 is 1. There's the 1x. And 2 divided by 1/5 is 2 times 5 over 1. 2 times 5 gives me 10, and it has to be negative. So there's a practice on taking the GCF out. So we got descending order, and we take the GCF out if there is a GCF. Let's keep reviewing. This is the way I factor. Makes sense. Keep following what I'm doing, and your factoring skills will be excellent. And if there's no GCF, then the factoring will have the product of the two brackets. In other words, we're assuming it's factorable. If it's not factorable, then I don't have to do any of this. So if there's no GCF, then I'm looking to write the polynomial as the product of the two binomials. So I'll do two brackets. So again, the two brackets are filled in with the polynomials. So this is a trinomial, and it's going to be factorable, no GCF, so we'll use the two brackets. X squared is x and x. Notice the product is 5. The sum is 6. There's the product, and there's the sum. So what's the factors of 5? 1 and 5. What factors of 5 will give you a 6? Well, there's only two factors. It's 5 and 1. And because it ends in a plus, I'm going to have two of these signs, two pluses. So what I do when I do these, I put my x's in, I put my signs in, and then I do my numbers. So let's obey that. B is a trinomial going to factor, no GCF. So if it's going to factor, it's going to be two brackets, two binomials. X squared is x and x. The product is negative 12. The product is the last term on the right. If the product is negative, I'm guaranteed to have a plus and a minus, because you multiply these two to get the negative 12 here. Now we look at the factors of 12. We do 1 times 12, we do 2 times 6, and we got a 3 times 4. A 6 has a 3, so a 12 has a 3. So 12 divided by 3 is 4, so 3 times 4. Now, over here, the two factors, we only had 2, 1 and 5, so 1 and 5 had to work. But these two factors, because the signs are the same, these two factors will add to give you the middle, the sum. Because the factors are different, the two factors will differ to get the 4. A nice, beautiful trick. Helps the factor fast. So 1 and 12 differ by 11. Nope. 2 and 6 differ by 4. So the answer is 2 and 6. But the 2, the larger factor of the 2 and the 6 is 6. That means the 6 is going to be negative. 2 is positive. Because the sum is negative 4, then obvious, I'm going to say obvious, be careful, that the larger factor has to be negative. So when you add, you get negatives. Perfect. And you want to check by default first, x squared. The outside is negative 6. The inside is 2. So negative 6 and 2 is a 4 with an x. And those two multiply together, the last term to give you negative 12. Perfect. Now we have two terms here, but we notice the middle term in here is understood to be 0x. This looks like the difference of two squares. This looks like x squared minus 3 squared. Yes, it is the difference of two squares. You're subtracting x squared, 3 squared. So with the difference of two squares, well, we do double brackets. X squared is x and x. The product is a negative, 9, but the sum is 0. So that's a plus and a minus sign going fitting in. So what's the factors of 9 that add up to give you 0? They had to be the same, 3 and a negative 3. So that's the difference of two squares, factored fast when you recognize it. D, I have a trinomial and there's no GCF, so I use double brackets. And I have an x squared, which is an x and an x. The product is a 6 positive and the sum is a negative 5. I've got to be careful with my s's and 5s. So if the product is positive, I'll have two of those signs, two minuses. Y, multiply, plus, add, negative. Perfect. And the factors of 6 are 1 and 6 and 2 and 3. So which factors here will give me a 5? Well, both of them will give you a 5. But remember, because the signs are the same, we're adding the numbers together to give me 5. If they were plus and minus, I would be subtracting to get 5. So we're adding to get 5. That they give me a 7. So it's 2 and 3, and it makes no difference. Because the two signs are the same, 2 and 3 can go anywhere. Perfect. And E is a trinomial, and it's made of a product of two binomials. X squared is x and x. Ends in a plus, so I'm going to have two of those signs. And the factors of 4 to give me a 4. 1, that's the product, and that's the sum. So the factors of 4 are 1 and 4, and 2 and 2. So what factors of 4 give you a 4 when you're adding, because the signs are the same? So it's a 2 and a 2. So that means I have an x minus 2 squared, because there's two of them. You can write a square on it or leave it like that. It's the same. And F. Notice that's a square, an x, and a constant. All of these are in descending order. So even though I didn't mention it, you have to keep it in your head. This is not in descending order, so I have to go x squared plus 3x plus 2. Because if I don't put this in descending order, I will not be able to factor it. I can't anyway. So now I have in descending order, and I have double brackets. Y gives you x times x is x squared. Ends in a plus. The product is a 2, and the sum is a 3. If the product is 2, the factors of 2 are 1 and 2. So because the product is positive, I'm going to have two pluses. Why? If the product is positive, right here, then I'll have two of those signs. 2 plus y. Net positive times the positive is positive. Add positive added to a positive is a positive. And the factors of 2 are 2 and 1, the only numbers that can work. They add up to give you the 3. Notice those two numbers multiply to give you 2. And if you add them together quickly, no, just add. 2 and 1 gives you 3. Practice. Work out the 6 of these. Pause your video, work them out, and play it back to see if you're going to get it right. Here we go. Double brackets. X squared is x and x. Plus 10. So product is positive 10. I'll write it down. Don't have to, but just as sum is a negative 7. Product is 10. Sum is negative 7. Product is on the end. Sum is in the middle. That's the C, what we used to call it. That's the C and the B. That's the B, that's the C. C is the product. B is the sum. Anyway, we have a product is positive, so we have two of the middle signs. So we have two minuses. And factors of 10 are 1 and 10, 2 and 5. What factors here? And because the signs are the same, they add up. So 1 and 10 gives you 11, so it must be a 2 and a 5. Multiply 10, add -7. So I know the outside and the inside will have an x. That's why so I can just multiply these together to get that one, and add those together to get that. Because the outside, inside will be -5x, 2x will have the x. And looks like I have two brackets because it's a binomial. And notice this is x squared minus, oh, that's a 5 squared. So that's the difference of two squares. Automatically, because the difference of two squares, it's x and x, 5 and 5 plus minus. The difference of two squares, x and 5 with a plus and a minus. Let's check it. The product is -25. Remember, the sum in the middle is a 0x, is not shown. So the product is a -5, no x term, so the sum is 0. So that means that these two numbers add up to give me 0, right? And they multiply to give me -25, correct? So that's the factorization. 25 and 1 won't give you a 0 in the middle. Perfect. Signs are plus minus. And number 3, descending order. So I go x squared plus 5x minus 14. There's the descending order. Double brackets. No GCF. So this is going to factor. It will factor as a set of brackets. X squared is x and x. The product is a -14, so that's a plus and a minus. And the factors of 14 to give me a 5. Well, let's see. 14 is 1 times 14 and 2 times 7. So 2 and 7 differ. Notice the signs are different, so the factors differ. So 2 and 7. So where does the 2 go and 7 go? Well, the larger number is going to be positive. So we've got a +7, -2. Again, multiply, -14. Add those two. 5. Perfect. And we know there's an x because it's the outside, inside. When we multiply, we'll have an x being added together. So notice, again, just repeat, the product is -14 and the sum is +5. So I didn't write this down, but there it is. And we check the factors of 14. It's the product that's going to give me the right combination that gives me the sum. It's the factors that I put down. And descending order perfect, double brackets. X squared is x and x. I have a plus product, so I have 2 of the middle signs, 2 pluses. Factors of 16, notice the product is 16 and the sum is 10. So the factors of 16, that gives me a 10. 1 and 16 first. I got a 2 and an 8, and I have a 4 and a 4. So because the signs are the same, they're adding up. That's a 17. And that, oh, there's the 10. These add up to 8. Because the signs are the same, we're adding the factors together. If the signs were plus and minus, I would be subtracting these two. And if I were plus and minus here, that would be a 15 or a 6 or a 0. But I'm adding, so 2 and 8. And because they're both pluses, I can put the 2 and the 8 anywhere in here. Descending order, I go x squared minus 81. X goes before the constant. That's a constant term. And notice, again, I have x squared minus 9 squared. I have the difference of 2 squares. So that means I got double brackets. I go x and x. I go 9 and 9. The product is a -81. And again, remind you that the sum is not there. So the sum is a 0 because that's a 0x, understood. So the sum is 0. Product is negative. I got a plus and a minus. Difference of 2 squares. The same terms with a plus and a minus. Because the outside is -9x, the inside is 9x, and they'll, when you add, give you 0. Perfect. Number 6, I have a trinomial, 2 brackets, x squared is x and x. The product is negative, so we're guaranteed to have a plus and a minus. They'll multiply to give you a negative. The factors of 12 are 12 and 1, 2 and 6, or 3 and 4. Which pair of factors? Again, signs differ, so the factors differ to give, 12 and 1. But the larger factor has to be negative in order to get the negative 11 when we add. So it's a negative 12 plus 1. Even though I put a plus and a minus, which I always do when I got signs are different. I do plus first, minus second. Then I decide where the larger factor is going to go because I have to add up to give me negative 11. Just keep reviewing. So that's rules of descending order, GCF. So we have descending order. We have the GCF. And if there's no GCF, I got double brackets. So that's the order that I do my factoring. So what about if we have a GCF and double brackets? So sometimes when we take out a GCF, we got to factor what's left again. So be careful. Most times this will happen as the math gets rougher. So, but I always keep reviewing. So what's the order? I do descending order. Then I say, is there a GCF? And if there's no GCF, I got double brackets. So there's the order. A 1, a 2, and a 3 that my brain, I always go through when I'm factoring. And if you do that, then everything's going to be perfect. Write down the list and say, when I'm factoring, here's what I do. There's the order that I will say. And here we go. Factor completely. I have 4 I'm going to do for you. And then you have 4 you can do yourself. You can do them all yourself. If you want to pause the video now and work all these out and press play and see if you got them right, perfect. But I'm show you these 4 and then you can do these 4. I always do some examples, and then I always give you some for you to practice. But in this case, we've already we're reviewing, so you can do all these yourself at the beginning and press play. Here we go. Do I have a GCF? Smallest number is 2, so 2 is in 6 and 4 as factors, so we take a 2 out. There's no x. So 2 divided into that is x squared. 6 divided by 2 is 3x, and 4 divided by 2 is 2. So there's the 2 taken out. Is this going to factor further? Well, let's see. Pretend you're on a sheet of scrap paper. To get x squared, I got x and x. The product is a positive 2, so I have 2 pluses. Because if that's a positive, then I have 2 in the middle terms, 2 pluses. Factors of 2 are 2 and 1. Done. There's the factorization. B, I don't have a number common, only 1, but I have an x in all my terms. So the smallest exponent is 1, so I take 1 out, x. X cubed divided by x squared. X cubed divided by x is x squared. X squared divided by x is 6x. And 7x divided by x is negative 7. Notice a 3, a 2, and a 1. So when you divide by x, you get a 2, a 1, and a constant. Perfect. And this is a trinomial. If it's going to factor, it's going to be 2 brackets. X squared is x and x. The product is negative 7, so guaranteed to have a plus and a minus for the signs. Factors of 7, there's only 2 of them, 7 and 1. And the 7 has to be positive, and the 1 has to be negative, because they multiply to give you negative 7, and you add to get 6. And the x is, when you do the FOIL, the x will come into play. And C, we have a 7 as a GCF, no variable. 7x squared divided by 7 is x squared. Negative 7 divided by 7 is negative 1. And I have x squared minus 1. And again, that's an x squared minus 1 squared. That's the difference of 2 squares. So we have double bracket, which is x and x. We have a 1 squared, so it's a 1 and a 1. And product is negative 1. Remember, the sum is 0, so we got a plus 1 minus 1. Multiply these two. 1 times negative 1, negative 1. Add 0. Again, just note, that's a 0x in the middle, understood. That means these two numbers will multiply to give you negative 1 and add to give you 0. Perfect. The difference of 2 squares. And D, descending order. Yep, we got a negative 3x squared plus 6x plus 9. When we move these around, we don't change the sign. And we have a negative leading coefficient, and we have also 3 is the smallest number. 3 is a factor of 6 and 9, so I'll take out a negative 3. Negative 3x squared divided by negative 3 is x squared. 6x divided by negative 3 is negative 2x. 9 divided by negative 3 is a negative 3. And we factor this further, and we got double brackets. X squared is x and x. Factors of 3 are 3 and 1, because that's a product. But let's check the signs. If that's a negative 3 product, then I have to have a plus and a minus. The factors of 3 is only two of them, 3 and 1. So where's the 3 going to go and the 1 going to go? Well, I know that that's a negative 2, so the larger factor of 3 is negative, and the smaller factor is positive. Again, multiply those two. Negative, positive 1 times negative 3, perfect. Add those two, and you get negative 2. Because when you multiply the last, you get the last term of the trinomial. When you add these two, you get the middle term of the trinomial with an x. Perfect. So now you have 4 to practice. Remember, just decide. The first rule is descending order. Obey it. The next rule is GCF. Take it out if it's there. And then you have to watch out for the double brackets. And if you can't do a GCF, you got to do double brackets. And sometimes, as in these 4 here, you have to do both. Here we go. GCF is descending order. Square x, perfect. 5 is the smallest number. 5 is a factor of these two, yes, because it ends in 0. So 5 will come out. So that's x squared minus 6x plus 8. You divide 5 into each one of these. Done. And that's a cubic. Sorry, this is a trinomial. It's not cubic. Cubic is 3. This is a trinomial. So x squared is x and x. Ends in a plus. Product is positive, so I'll have 2 of the middle signs. 2 minuses. Why? When you multiply these two signs, you get a plus. When you add them, you get a minus. Perfect. The factors of 8. 8 is the product. Negative 6 is the sum. Just write that down to make sure we don't forget. So there's the product and there's the sum. So we're dealing with the factors of 8. We're dealing with this factors of this number. 1 times 8, 2 times 4. And because the signs are the same, the factors of 8 are adding up to give me a 6. So 1 and 8 is not going to do it. So it's 2 and 4. And again, check. Multiply. Negative 2, negative 4, 8. Add these two. Perfect. And number 2, it's in descending order. And I have an x common, and the smallest exponent is a 2. So x squared is the GCF. X to the 4, subtract 2, is a 2. And when you divide here, you just get 100. Multiply back. X squared times x squared is x to the 4. X squared times 100 is a negative 100x squared. And looks like we have 100 is a perfect square. So it looks like we have x squared minus 10 squared. The difference of 2 squares. And the difference of 2 squares is the same terms, but a plus minus. X and x, 10 and 10, a plus and a minus. Same terms, only one is a plus and the other one is a minus. Multiply these two. 10 times negative 10, negative 100. Add these two. 0. Notice there's no x, so that's perfect. The difference of 2 squares. The sum is 0 when you add these two together. And that's a 0x understood. Descending order. Negative 2x squared minus 12x minus 18. 1, a 2, and a constant, x to the 0. I have a leading coefficient of negative 2. 2 is a factor of 12 and 18, so take a negative 2 out. Negative 2 into these two, into this one, is x squared. Negative 12x divided by negative 2 plus 6x. Negative 18 divided by negative 2 plus 9. And we have, see if we can go further. And we have an x squared is x and x. Ends in a plus. The product is plus 9. So we have 2 of the middle signs. 2 pluses. And the factors of 9 to give me a 6, well, you can see is 3 and 3. Factors of 9 is, product is 9, so it's 1, 9, 3, 3. So which pair adds up to give you 6? 3 and 3. So, and you could write that further. That's x plus 3 squared because there's 2 of them. And just a little tiny review. That's a perfect square trinomial up right there. So x squared plus 6x plus 9 is a perfect square trinomial because that's a perfect square, which is x squared. That's a 3 squared. And if you have a perfect square trinomial, the first and the last terms are both pluses, right? And they're both perfect squares. And if you multiply 3 times the x and double it, you get the 6. So that's a perfect square trinomial, which means, if it is, it's an x, and it's a plus, it's a 3, and it's a plus because of the middle sign. So if you write it like that, squared, you'll have the right answer. But most people will just do the x's and then the signs and then the numbers, and then they'll come to this. So you can recognize a perfect square trinomial. Just reviewed the perfect square trinomial for you. Descending order, yes. 3 is in the factor of 6 and 45, so we'll take out a 3x. 3x cubed divided by 3x is x squared. 6x squared divided by 3x is 2x. Negative 45x divided by 3x is a negative 15. And notice a 3, a 2, and a 1. So these should go down by 2, 1, and a constant. Perfect. And let's factor that trinomial with 2 brackets. X squared is x and x. The product is a negative 15, and the sum is 2. There's the product, and there's the sum. Factors of 15 is 1 and 15, and 5 and 3. And the signs, because the product is negative, we'll have a plus and a minus. So what factors of 15 will give me a 2? 15 and 1 will give me a 14. 5 and 3 will do it. Because, again, remind you, the signs are different, so the factors differ. So 5 and 3 differ by 2. But the 5 has to be positive, and the 3 has to be negative. Multiply these two, negative 15. Add these two, plus 2. Perfect. So that's a review of the basic rules of factoring, which is extremely important. Factoring, extremely important. How to work this out. So this is the end. The next video on this, I'll have a review, and the review will summarize the whole chapter, treat it like a quiz. So, what are the rules? I do descending order, DESC, and I call it order, just write abbreviation. Number 2, I'll do the GCF. Greatest, that's a C, so I'm going to put a C there. Greatest common factor. Do descending order, greatest common factor, and the last is double set of brackets. And sometimes you do a GCF, and you'll have to do the inside of the brackets as a double bracket, so beware of that. So, if you like my video, click on the like button, click on the subscribe button if you're not a subscriber, and the notification bell because there's more videos that I'm doing in the near future. Write a comment on my videos, and www.mathfullyexplained.com is my website. And in that website, I have 3 sections. One on me, my degrees and the teaching experience. My video section has the strategies you can use to help you learn your math. And the section on content gives the topics and the number of videos on each topic. And that's in black font, is what's online right now. And the red font, which is what we develop in the future. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.